And by default, it's got a GB pound. The first party profile, I could put in if they've got a registration number, and you'll find there's an algorithm that checks that registration number. So that is a valid registration. So normally GB plus 9 numbers would find the GB code validation in the GB. And here, later on, we're going to play with just things for, say, simulation, tax. But here, we should only be currently on the database one regime to rate called GB VAT setup. So on here, what I'm then going to look at, in this case, my party again, I'm looking at my third party, in this case, in terms of a customer, and it's not Birmingham, it's actually Business World that I'm after. So the customer name is my Business World, and here they've got multi-sites, but with this demo, I want it to be currently a UK site. So in my customer, I've got a bill to. So I'm billing to my Birmingham address under Business World, and I've shipped to the same address. If I come down to the transaction lines, we can start to see the transaction attributes. And these transaction attributes would either be defaulted from our configuration, or they could be manually typed. And again, best practice is you would have as majority of these transaction in terms of attributes defaulted, so that the tax engine automatically calculates the taxes, statuses, rates, etc. So here, what I'm going to do is say, of the two types, is it a good or a service? I'm going to say it's a good. And what I'm going to look for is our global item master, which is referred to as operations. And in that, again, in that global item master, we've defined items. Doesn't mean you have to use items. Again, we can have, if you like, a non-inventory item setup. So here I'm buying a server, and to keep the maths nice and easy, it's a very cheap server. It's going to be $100. So my taxable basis is the quantity times the unit price. So my taxable basis would be £100 in this case, not dollars. And important, perhaps in some of the triangulations of which warehouse, where was this shipped from? So this has been shipped from the Bristol warehouse. Other transactional impact, I might have a regime built on tax classification, product categories, the intended use of the item, some defined product fiscal classifications, use classifications. I might even derive everything from a specific account. So I can test all of that. If I save, based on my selection of that transaction, if I then view the tax lines, in this case for regimes that have switched on for both simulation and transaction, this has been switched on for simulation and transaction. So here, if I look at the regime, it re-emphasizes in terms of the place of supply. So I've shipped it to Great Britain. I've shipped it from a Bristol warehouse, so that's GB. The bill to is GB. The bill from is GB. So in the UK, this regime for the UK legal entity or business unit, in our case, it's a business unit. The UK VAT regime is relevant. On that, it's applied a VAT tax. The standard tax rate and the standard tax status is 20%. And if we scroll down, you'll see it shows us the evaluation of the 7 steps from place of supply. It's picked the ship from, tax is applicable, the registration has come from the bill from party, so that's my first party legal entity. The status is standard, we've got a standard rate applying. The formula used for my tax basis is the $100, and sorry, £100, not dollars, and 20% means there's a $20 tax charge. And there we're using all the default rules from my simplified in terms of regime to rate setup or a foundation tax setup. Now let me show you just how a subtle change can change the rules-based engine. And again, this is not best practice, perhaps it's just a guide of what can happen. So here I'm going to make a subtle change in the ship to. So we haven't shipped it to a UK address for the customer, we've shipped it to Paris. So again, if I save, it will drive the tax engine again. And if I look at my tax lines this time, notice the still GB tax is relevant, but this time it's selected my GB VAT tax intra-EU. And you'll see from the list, if we come down, there is a rule that has applied. So it hasn't took all my seeded defaults. So this is a simple, if you like, override. And if I look at here, a nice reflection of what's possible down the bottom. Notice we've got a whole host of determining factors, some with qualifiers, some without. So here, let's perhaps start from the bottom. And you can see down the bottom, first of all, we can only charge a 0 rate if my customer is registered, in this case France, and if it's product goods, services, different rules apply. So here we've said this rule will only apply if it's goods. If we've shipped it to, we've got a zone here, somewhere within the European Union. The process flow look, transaction generic classification here has to be a sales transaction. Within the European community, my ship from or ship to has to be registered. And then we've got, if you like, clarified our geography. So if we've shipped it from the UK, which we have, it's come from our Bristol warehouse, but the next one down is the ship to. So where we've shipped it to is not equal to United Kingdom. So in effect, we've moved it to a member of the European Union. Again, if it was export, we've got different rules applying. And you'll see there that we've got this simple rule overriding my default. So rather than being charged a 20%, the standard status with a 20% rate, we've got the intra-EU status with a 0 rate. And again, I might have tagged on various reporting codes there to drive my different reporting needs. And that's what I wanted to show you. Again, just to think the strategy, very much, it's all going to be dictated by your tax experts and your business flows. And it's all going to be dictated really by the business. Who are you? Where you operate, what customers you deal, what products you deal with, what process. And it might be you end up with a simplified setup. The foundation setup still can be complicated by product exceptions, customer exemptions, and locations. And then you've got really the two other extremes. And you could summarize, we've summarized those in a previous slide, where you use the tax rules engine, so advanced rules, to change that default. If it's just one or two, simplified. If majority of the transactions are changed, then you're probably looking at the complex regime. So that concludes this introduction, where we've looked at where you can get more help. First stop shop is docs.oracle.com. There you've got all the user guides, the implementation guides. Don't forget Customer Connect, community where you can, in terms of post, in terms of some burning questions or challenges. And then we've had a look at the overview of the tax configuration. And I've left you with the thought of what's your strategy, using the simple regime to rate setup, or are you going to need more of the advanced configuration using various tax rules, using the product, place, process, and product to override that foundation setup. So that concludes this overview chapter.